Before the release of the Falkland Ship Services mod, I wanted to hold off from saying anything more about Starfield, for seeming as if I didn't have anything positive to say about the game, or as if I didn't see the benefits of Bethesda's strategy surrounding its new IP or the Creation Store. The store itself was a great idea. Even Starfield as a game was a great idea. But Bethesda as a whole seems to have an odd issue with execution, and it's such a weird and awkward problem to have that I coined it the Cora Coe Effect. For those who are unaware, Cora Coe is the daughter of characters Sam Coe and Lillian Hart. She tags along as an additional NPC so long as you have Sam Coe recruited in your immediate group or assigned to an outpost. To be fair, there's nothing inherently wrong with Cora Coe, the character. She didn't do anything illicit, and she doesn't play any major role in the main quest. However, if you grow accustomed to having Cora around, hearing her talk to her father Sam, and crack silly jokes, you can't help but get attached to the character. If you inevitably talk with Cora, you'll discover that she enjoys reading old Earth books and has dreams of piloting her own starship one day. Now imagine traveling the space lanes with Sam Coe and his daughter Cora for over 200 in-game hours, and in that time during a quest, you discovered that there's possible survivors on a distant planet called Cassiopeia 1. So you and Captain Sarah Morgan venture PlanetSide to investigate, and after a difficult and arduous search, you discover a promising location where the survivors might be holed up, only to have Cora Coe point a gun at you? Talk about jarring, confusing, and being dumbfounded somehow all at once. If I'm being generous, I have to assume that it wasn't Bethesda's intention to break the player's sense of immersion here, especially with such a hopeful and emotional storyline. So if that wasn't their goal, why have Cora Coe show up here at all, of all places? Now obviously in hindsight, these two NPCs aren't the same people, they just look nearly identical. I'm framing things in this way to showcase just how off-putting this encounter is if you didn't see it coming. There's other notable clones of Cora Coe in-game too. A total of 3 if you count even some minor encounters. Again, this isn't Cora Coe's fault. Also, this isn't a reflection on the quality of her character in-game. My question is, why even put Cora's uniqueness on the chopping block in this way? It's certainly a bizarre choice at face value, but even more bizarre if you've seen Cora's unique and original concept art design. How Cora Coe went from an adorable, freckled-faced redhead to a clone of 3 other in-game children is beyond me. I just don't see a world where what we actually got was a better choice than what Bethesda originally had planned. And this is why I coined the Cora Coe Effect. There's a good number of confusing and jarring decisions Bethesda made with Starfield, oftentimes choosing a worse option over any other that would have been an improvement to the overall experience. Take the Hunter's face reveal during the In Their Footsteps quest as another example. How much of an impact did the developers really expect this moment to have if the Hunter is revealed to be a nearly forgettable, unimportant NPC like Keeper Aquilus? Imagine if the player doesn't even remember this NPC, and even more so, why should they? Even in a world where the player had photographic memory, they'd still struggle to recall a series of possible events where Keeper Aquilus would have access or resources to find and collect all 24 artifacts. There's other weird instances too, like members of the Trackers Alliance flagging you down in a new game, wanting you to join their ranks back on Aquila when you haven't even done anything noteworthy yet to justify their interest in you. Sprinkle in 40 to 50 of these weird little instances around enough, and you get words tossed around like jarring, outdated, boring, bad writing, and immersion breaking. A lot of times it's the little things that make Starfield feel like an unfinished game. The way most reasonable people could ever justify rookie mistakes like these from a seasoned AAA studio is that the game must have been rushed or unfinished. But who really knows? Anyone could make huge leaps in logic to justify some of these odd choices by Bethesda, but are you willing to make 40? 50? Explain to me how it is that my character's father dropped by and left a note with Noel when I haven't even left the lodge. I haven't broken the news to my parents that I'm working with Constellation yet. Even more so, how'd they get into the place without a security watch to even leave a note? It doesn't matter how you restructure or remix scenarios like this. It shouldn't be possible. Now the player's suspension of disbelief, me, is shattered before ever meeting the in-game family. How many more times is the player expected to endure missteps like this before totally being ejected out of the experience? If I had to give a ballpark estimate whenever asked, in hindsight, how complete was Starfield on initial release, I'd say about 68%. But it won't be obvious until about midway through the game. 70% with the series of patches and bug fixes, a few percent more with the additions of the Rev 8 and Trackers Alliance faction, and about 75% with the addition of the Shattered Space DLC. Sure, I'll gladly take more Starfield, but none of these newer additions resolve any of the problems I've presented earlier. None of these additions address the Cora Coe Effect. In my opinion, the standard vanilla game needs a rework. No, not an overhaul, just a simple rework. A number of elements and story beats need to be adjusted, delayed, fleshed out, and shuffled around so that they make much more sense logically, logistically, and contextually. With this in mind, it's safe to assume that one of the biggest issues that some players had with Starfield is that it oftentimes feels like the game was intentionally made incomplete so that the developers could sell missing elements back to us in the creation store. I'm not one to accuse anyone of something without any proof, but I do find it strange just how high quality most of the creation store content is, including Shattered Space, compared to the vanilla game. It's odd just how much closer Falkland Ship Services mod gets to the cozy, laid-back atmosphere that Starfield's original concept art promoted, compared to any of the habs in the vanilla game. The high quality of the official creations content by Bethesda shows that they haven't lost their touch and they've gotten surprisingly better over the years. At Hell's Gate DLC is amazing. The Perfect Recipe add-on is great. The Diemog ATV is great. Escape has gotten rave reviews, which means the devs still know what they're doing and they still know how to make great content, but somehow they got it wrong with the vanilla game? Can you see why all of this controversy seems awkward, suspicious, and confusing? Making a 75% complete video game only to try to sell customers back the other missing 25% in increments isn't gonna fly, especially not with your veteran fans. This isn't the type of audience you've cultivated, Bethesda. We're mostly seasoned gamers here. We have the luxury of your past IPs to draw from. If your goal with Starfield was to say yes to the player as much as possible, why so many essential NPCs? Why isn't there a more gritty and refined underbelly for the player to participate in outside of specific factions? If not, this was the perfect opportunity to make a space Morag Tong as well as the futuristic version of the Dark Brotherhood. If I'm reading things right, apparently a complete game now costs you $130. I'm hopeful that this is all related to some political Microsoft business dealing nonsense outside of making great games. But if this is the type of game studio Bethesda is becoming, and this is a tradition we can expect to see with future titles, I can't support them anymore. Let's all hope that's not the case though.